Happy Wednesday, readers. Today for our reading workshop lesson, you're going to need your copy of The Tiger Rising. Remember, you have a digital copy that I attached to today's lesson, your reading notebook, and your Tiger Rising book packet that we'll work on later today. We're going to first go ahead and turn in our notebook to our lessons that we've been working on with developing our better understanding of our characters. So yesterday we were working on how to develop a significant idea about our characters by looking at things that we realize about our characters and then showing what their desires are doing for them as that character in the story. We then were continuing adding on to our list of how we grow ideas about a character, and we're going to make defensible arguments about who our characters are and what they reveal by their actions. So we're going to go ahead and turn the page. Today we're going to be working on page 39. And before we insert anything in page 39, we're going to go ahead to our table of contents. And as we said, we're going to be continuing on using our novel, The Tiger Rising, in discussing how we can dig deeper into our characters and interpreting who they are and how they might change. So today we're going to be looking at reaching for precise language. Remember, at any time you may pause the video to get caught up and organized and then push play. So reaching for precise language. And today's date is 9-23-20. We're going to go ahead and turn back to page 39. And then we're going to keep our notebook open because we're going to work within the book first before we come and actually record some information in our in the notebook. I remember a time in the spring when my class was busy working in their bell work and Mrs. Rio came in to talk to me. I remember noticing a lot of my class were eyeing our conversation. And I can't be sure, but I thought that they were thinking, are we in trouble? And then when they noticed that Mrs. Rio and I started laughing, it almost seemed like they were taking a breath of relief because they didn't know if they were going to be in trouble, but they read our conversation and thought, phew, we're off the hook. What they were doing that morning, they were reading people. And that is something that we all do all the time in life. A friend might walk past you and without saying hello, seeming to give you maybe a cold shoulder, and you might think, wait, did I do something wrong? Or someone slams their locker closed and whirls around to walk away, and you might think that maybe he's mad or he's late for something. Now that you're older and more experienced, you're going to not just have ideas about our characters, but you'll have insightful ideas about those characters. So for the next couple days, we're going to work on lifting the level of our ideas about those characters. And to do that, we're going to be thinking back of our thoughts on those characters in the text that we're reading. When you look back at some of your thoughts on your characters, I want you to think of that million-dollar question. How can you lift the level of your thinking about characters? How could you make your idea more unique or more insightful? Today, I'm going to teach you that when readers want to grow not just any old ideas about characters, but insightful ideas, they try to reach for exact, or what we call precise, true words to convey those thoughts about their characters. So right now we're going to do a rereading of chapter 14 of The Tiger Rising. So you can either look in your digital copy text of chapter 14, or you can look at the screen and you can follow along with Mrs. Ling in our text. And as we do this, I want you to notice Sistine's actions and decisions. Our goal will be to try to come up with words to describe the sort of person Sistine seems to be in the description. "What's he doing way out here?" she demanded. Rob shrugged. "I don't know," he said. "He's Beauchamp's, I guess." "Beauchamp's what?" said Sistine. "His pet?" "I don't know," said Rob. "I just like looking at him. Maybe Beauchamp does too. Maybe he just likes to come out here and look at him." "That's selfish," said Sistine. Rob shrugged. "This isn't right for this tiger to be in a cage. It's not right." "We can't do nothing about it," Rob said. We could let him go, says Sistine. We could set him free. She put her hands on her hips. It was a gesture that Rob had already come to recognize and be wary of. We can't, he said. There's all them locks. We can saw through them. Nah, said Rob. The mere thought of letting the tiger go made his legs itch like crazy. We have to set him free, Sistine said, her voice loud and certain. Nuh-uh, said Rob. It ain't our tiger to let go. It's our tiger to save, Sistine said fiercely. So, as you listen to that section, how would you describe Sistine? I want you to think of a word or two. Some of you might think, well, she sounds bossy. And I was kind of thinking that too. But we have to think of what is our evidence to support our thinking. Some of you might say that she orders Rob around a lot. And she said in the text, the tiger isn't hers, and yet she talks as if the tiger and the decision belongs to her, and she is the deciding factor. But remember, the goal is to use precise words, to talk and to think about our characters. I bet that word bossy isn't the most precise word that we could choose. And Sistine is more complicated than just one word, bossy. Do you see, readers? I don't just grab the first word that comes to my mind and settle for that. When I use general or non-specific words to describe a character, I catch myself and I say, oops, I can do better than that. So now let's go back and back up that reading and try it again. I want you to listen to my thought process. Okay, let's see. Sistine seems to be bossy, but let me try to be more specific. Exactly what is she like? Controlling, feisty maybe? Yes, that feels true, but she's more than just feisty. I could say she's passionate. Passionate, that feels more accurate. She's always speaking up for something she believes in. Listen to her. This isn't right for this tiger to be in a cage. It's not right. Also, even when Rob tells her that they can't do anything about it, she presses on. Sistine, she's passionate. We could not let him go. We could set him free. Even when Rob reminds her that there are locks in the cage, she still doesn't let go of it. We can saw through them, she said. See, right there, she's fighting for that tiger with all of her might. I want us to go ahead now to our notebook. And we're going to turn back to page 39. And we're going to write today's title again in our text. So you might need to double check with our table of contents just to make sure that you have the right title. It says Reaching for Precise Language. So write that at the top. Reaching for precise language. And we're going to be making a small web about our character. So a web always starts with a central or main focus. And because we're looking deeper into who Sistine is in this part of the text, we could then start generating some thoughts. We said she's bossy. She seems like a know-it-all. We might even say that she seemed controlling. We also then decided that maybe passionate was the better word to describe who she is. So when we start generating our thoughts, we don't just stop at the first few thoughts of the words that describe her. We have to really search for the perfect one. So when we find that perfect one, we need to then be able to develop our thought about our character. So this is when we're going to turn our web into a statement about who our character is. So we're going to say, Sistine is, and we said we like that word passionate. Passionate feels right for the way that she's being described in this section. So Sistine is passionate, period. She isn't willing to let anything get in the way of her save the tiger mission. So there's a apostrophe there that went up to the other word, period. And then the next sentence is, she's a person with a cause. So we were able to then find that precise word that we felt describes who our character is. But we didn't just stop at finding the precise language, because sometimes it's hard to find just one word that describes our character. We want to back it up with the evidence from the text. So we want to ground our thinking of our character back in the evidence from the text. So we then added, she isn't willing to let anything get in the way of her Save the Tiger mission. She's a person with a cause. Do you see that we just came up with a little list of possible descriptors for Sistine? And whenever we thought of a word, we asked, is that exactly the true word, or is that the right word that describes who she is and the reasons we would then use that word to describe her? We were rereading closely to look for that evidence. We can also use our schema or our connections to other books or other stories that we've read. Some of you in 3rd grade read the story of the Stone Fox. Sistine kind of reminds me of who Willie was, and that willingness to stay focused on their mission or be a person with a cause. When we describe our characters, we might need to compare to someone else to find that precise language to describe who those characters are. Now I'm going to ask you to do this on your own with our character of Rob. So you're going to go ahead and then write Rob in a circle, and you're going to be listening to this next section, and I want you to come up with some words that you feel would describe who Rob is as a character. As we finish up, I'm going to talk about some of those words that you might be using on your own web, and then we'll come up with a way to describe who Rob is and the evidence that supports that thought. We're going to go back into our text in the same chapter. We're going to continue where we just left off. The tiger stopped pacing. He pricked his ears back and forth, looking somewhere past Sistine and Rob. Shh, said Rob. The tiger cocked his head. All 3 of them listened. It's a car, said Rob. A car's coming. It's Beauchamp. We gotta go. Come on. He grabbed her hand and pulled her into the woods, and she ran with him. She let him hold on to her hand. It was an impossibly small and bony hand, as delicate as a skeleton of a baby bird. They ran together, and Rob felt his heart move inside him, not from fear or exertion, but from something else. It was as if his soul had grown and was pushing everything up higher in his body. It was an oddly familiar feeling, but he couldn't remember what it was called. Is he behind us? Sistine asked breathlessly. Rob shrugged. It was hard to move his shoulders up and down and keep hold of Sistine's hand at the same time. Sistine said, stop shrugging your shoulders at me. I hate it. I hate the way you shrug all the time. And that made Rob remember Willie Mae saying that when he shrugged he looked like a skinny bird trying to fly. It struck him as funny now. He laughed out loud at the thought of it. And without asking him what he was laughing about, without dropping his hand, without stopping, Sistine laughed too. Then Rob remembered the name of the feeling that was pushing up inside of him, filling him full to overflowing. It was happiness. That was what it was called. When you listen to that section of the book, I wanted you to go back to your web in your notebook and create a list of ideas of what word do you feel would best describe who Rob is as a character in that moment. Remember that sometimes there's no one single word that will do. So as you listen to the book, you were asked to write down some ideas of words that you felt might describe who our character is. So you might have written down words like scared, or you might have written down words of he's being brave and growing to show emotions. You might have written other words around that we're not going to write. So remember, you were asked to write maybe 4 ideas about who Rob was in that moment when he was with Sistine in the woods. We're going to take some of our thoughts and we're going to write a statement about what we think describes Rob with our precise language. So you might use a comparison to another character that you've read about in a previous story, or you might make a connection. So we're going to write the statement of Rob is a bit like a turtle, period. He's in a hard shell and he is kind of scared. So he doesn't come out of it, period. But in this scene, he's popping his head out, comma, getting out of his shell. Period. So although we were tempted to use more generalized words such as scared by itself, we know that sometimes we can't just find that one word that describes like we did with Sistine. We have to describe it using comparisons. So in this particular statement about our character of Rob, we compared him to a turtle and what we think about turtles. When I think about a turtle, I think of a scared little turtle trying to cross the road, and when it hears a loud noise or sees someone, it quickly retreats back into its shell and it stays there until the coast is clear. So at first, that's kind of how I think of Rob. You know, he's kind of staying with all of those emotions in his suitcase that he wants to keep shut tight so nothing comes out. And he's not cried since his mother's passed away. So all of those really deep feelings that he might be feeling, or the feelings of loss and, you know, sadness, he keeps buried down deep. So I think of that as a turtle. He's keeping those things tucked away deep inside. But now with Sistine as his friend, he's starting to kind of poke his head out, or maybe open up that suitcase just a little bit to start feeling maybe the way that he used to feel. So I was able to make that comparison to something that would be relatable to my description of who Rob is. So today we were reaching for those precise words or language to describe our characters. We ground those ideas back in the text using the evidence. As you read your independent books, I want you to try to use the same strategy, thinking more deeply about our characters. Think about those descriptions that the author has provided us. And then what precise language could you use as a reader to make that description? Today we're going to continue reading. During our time, you're going to listen to the next chapters of our story. So listen to chapters 16 through 20. You are then going to work in your book packet to start on the next section. So the next section starts on page 13. Make sure that you're writing the page numbers on each of these so you know which pages you are supposed to be working on. So the Dictionary Detectives, first chapter 16 through 20 starts on page 13. You then turn the page in the Vocabulary Studies 14. The Understanding Story is 15. And then the final page for this section is the chapter summary, which is on page 16. So today, after you're done with this lesson, you're going to listen to chapters 16 through 20, and you're going to begin working on the next 4 pages. Remember, these do not need to be completed today. You will also have tomorrow to finish up and submit these pages to me. We're going to look back in our notebook to the chart, Grow Ideas About a Character, to add some more tips to help strengthen how we are looking at our characters in our text. So go ahead and write your next star, and we're going to write the note, notice anything about a character that the author repeats and think why. So think about when we read this first read aloud, There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom, and when the author repeated the statements describing where Bradley was or what Bradley said to other characters. When they described the placement of where he sat in the classroom, they always said, last seat, last row. And that helped us as readers understand that that was where he felt that he belonged, and that described who he was in his classroom compared to the other students. The next tip that we're going to remind ourselves is repeated details such as character traits, features, so character features, or objects, they're considered significant. And then the last one that is more focused on what we've done today is we're going to reach for precisely the right words, comma, or it could be considered an image that we're creating in our mind as we read a book, or we can use comparison. So to other characters in other books.